One of my favorite laptops is back, and for the 2020 version, the Dell XPS 13, well, it's got one really subtle tiny change. What's new in the 2020 version of the XPS 13 from Dell versus previous versions is that the 13-inch screen, it's now a 13.4-inch screen instead of a 13.3-inch screen. And you may say, well, that's so tiny I would never even notice. What they've also done is change the aspect ratio of the screen. Instead of a 16:9 aspect ratio, like a lot of other laptops, it's now a 16:10 aspect ratio, and that gives you a little bit more of up and down real estate. Let's say if you're working on work documents or reading something online, as opposed to 16:9, which is the same as HD TV screens, really well suited for movies, maybe not so much for everything else. I think it gives it a cleaner, more modern look, and I like that a lot. Up until now, Dell has been iterating on this XPS 13 every year, making subtle changes, improvements. By last year, they pretty much had worked out all the problems. The last big one was that webcam, which until last year's model was below the screen. That's the only place they could fit it. And when you use it, you got this really weird up-the-nose shot. So last year they fixed that. It's still above the screen where it should be again this year. The only real major physical changes are that slightly bigger screen, and they've shaved a couple of millimeters off the body. So it actually has a little bit of a smaller footprint than last year's model. You really have to look at them side by side in order to tell the difference. Now, one laptop you really are going to want to look side by side against the XPS 13 is, of course, its almost sister laptop in a way, Apple's 13-inch MacBook Air. And of course, Apple just put out a new version of the Air just as this new version of the XPS 13 hit. So fairly or unfairly, we're going to compare the two a lot. And when you put them next to each other, the MacBook Air, it definitely has a bigger footprint. The body is bigger and wider. The XPS 13, it's got a smaller body. If that's important to you, there's a clear winner there. They actually weigh exactly the same. I weighed the review configurations I had of both. They're both 1 pound, 13 ounces. Although in the smaller body of the XPS 13, it actually feels denser and almost heavier than it should because that weight is packed into a smaller form. Whereas the MacBook Air, it feels like a MacBook Air. We all know what that's supposed to feel like, and I think we've all decided that's a good body mass to weight ratio. But when you look at them again side by side, that super thin bezel on the XPS 13, you really can't beat that. It's miles above what the MacBook Air looks like with the screen bezels, and even that on the MacBook Air is an improvement over the Air from pre-2018, which was just gigantic and really archaic, and it took them a long time to even modernize that part of the body. Although again, next to the XPS 13, it does not look as nice. Now, while both of these are made out of aluminum, the Air has that, carved out of one solid piece of aluminum look. Everything is the same color and texture. On the XPS 13, again, carved out of a single piece of aluminum body, but the top layer, the wrist rest where the keyboard goes, in this version, that's a woven white glass-like material. I think it's very interesting. It probably saves them on weight. I never thought it had the same unified, all-of-one-piece look that MacBooks do, but I'll tell you, my son, since we're all working from home, we get a lot of input on our products and reviews. My son looked at them both, and he thought the XPS 13 looked much, much fancier. He liked that one better. Both the MacBook Air and the XPS 13 are supposed to start with inexpensive Intel Core i3 versions. You don't really want that. You want to start by trading up to the Core i5. You can get a decent build of both of those systems for about $1,250. And with that, you get 256 gigs of storage, you get 8 gigs of RAM, you get an Intel Core i5. You can go up from there and get a Core i7 and more storage. And the prices, frankly, stay pretty static between the two big brands, depending on how you upgrade them. Now, I know we're really leaning into comparing the XPS 13 with the MacBook Air, but you know what? For many years, not just Dell, but every PC company has been trying to, without saying so much, they've been trying to make something that will make you go, oh, I don't need a MacBook Air, I can get this instead. In fact, for Dell, it was so much so that for a couple of years we internally called this model the Dell Book Air because it looked and felt so similar. And now it has a little bit more of a personality of its own, and especially if you want something that's very portable, 13-inch, you can configure pretty powerfully, but you either don't want to or can't use Mac OS, you're going to be a Windows guy, well, then the Dell XPS 13, the new 2020 version,